Nope, it's the most inaccurate thing in the world. I've heard this talking point and rebutted it like 50 billion times. Everybody will point out the one quote where Hillary Clinton said that Donald Trump was an illegitimate president. That one quote. Donald Trump has made 50,000 other statements saying that the election was rigged.
Yeah, he repeats himself quite a lot, but that isn't the point.
No,
that isn't. If I'm on stage as a comedian doing these jokes because it's in the culture and everyone laughs because they recognize the quote-unquote truth in it, isn't that the point? A lot of people thought the election was stolen.
Point. If we look at the behavior of the Democratic Party and the Democratic establishment versus the behavior of the Republican Party, Republican leaders in the Republican establishment, the difference is night and day. Hillary Clinton ceded the election the night of. Donald Trump tried to claim victory before the votes were even counted. Hillary Clinton gave one interview where she was salty and she said something about him being an illegitimate president. Donald Trump asked his vice president to overturn the results of the election. There have been a couple of people online that have gone too far, for sure, with the Russia collusion stuff. Donald Trump on January 6th basically led his followers into an attempted coup d'etat of the government, of which some people, the Oath Keepers, have been charged with sedition. The comparison is not even remotely close.
What I find very interesting, Destiny, is the journey from right to left. Do you think the left is better at providing solutions than the right? Is that the reason why you moved over?
No, I don't think anybody's that great at providing solutions. I would say the left is marginally better because at least most of their stuff is rooted more in reality than the right is, at least in the United States. When people on the right don't think climate change is real, I think some of them don't believe in evolution, might think the world is 6,000 years old, don't believe vaccines work, don't believe in climate change. Yeah, it's hard to begin a conversation with, well, how do we fix this problem when a lot of those people are completely just descriptively, factually off reality. People on the left, though, obviously they do their virtue signaling as well. They say dumb shit sometimes, or a lot of times. My personal philosophy doesn't really revolve around which side is making the better prescriptions. It's more just where do I align at philosophically in terms of how do I believe the country should be ran.
I mean, look, and I'm going to push back a little bit on that. And just so you know, I regard myself as being on the left. Former primary school teacher and secondary school teacher in deprived schools for 12 years, etc., etc., etc. Economically, very much on the left. But surely, Destiny, when you were saying, don't believe in vaccines, believe in evolution, what you're doing is you're pinpointing a certain part of the right, the religious right. There are lots of people who are very pro-vaccine on the right. There are a lot of people who are atheists on the right. You are just pointing to a certain part in a way which some people do on the right when they go, oh, nobody on the left believes that there's two sexes. And I'm like, hang on a minute, mate. I think there's two sexes. Do you get what I'm saying, Destiny?
Yeah, I mean, 48% of Republicans in the United States don't believe in evolution. I could look up other numbers if you want for vaccines. I think 68% of Republicans don't believe the last election was real. I don't buy this.
What do you mean they don't believe it was real? You mean they believe it was stolen?
Yeah, they believe it was stolen. Yeah, that the election was completely rigged. The polls were actually, or not the polls, the actual votes were tabulated differently, or ballots were hit or whatever. There is a radical wing to the left in the United States, but that radical wing is a fringe. It's small. It's found in colleges. It's almost non-existent legislatively, and it's found on Twitter. But on the Republican side, on the conservative side, the radical wing is right now the majority of the party. It's significantly different. So I'm willing to acknowledge that there's radicals on the left and right. The difference is on the right, they've become almost the majority of the Republican Party in some ways. And I wouldn't agree with that idea that not believing in these things and being hyper-religious, that's just a few conservatives. That's not true in the United States. The evangelical voting base in the United States is the most important voting base of the right. And I think a large number of Republicans believe in some pretty surprising things revolving around these topics. But again, we can get into any of those specifics.
Yeah. I mean, for us too, growing up, and our heroes are people like Bill Hicks and George Carlin, who were always mocking those very people, the religious right in the United States, who were at that time saying, don't say this, you can't say this, you don't blah, 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 blah. I mean, I would quibble somewhat with the idea that the far left has little influence. I mean, I seem to remember them burning down quite a lot of stuff in the middle of 2020. But in terms of what I'm curious about, you're someone who's been very strongly supportive of the idea of free speech, and that certainly has, as a value, has been eroded in recent years on the left. It seems to me, at least as an observer. Would you agree with that?
I don't think anybody really cares about free speech. The left has definitely attacked it as much as they can across social media institutions, or the institution of social media, I guess, or internet stuff. But the right wants to legislate a lot of freedom of speech out of existence, which is really scary to me. And it seems like those ideas enjoy broad support among Republicans. So,
like legislate free speech. How do you mean?
So, for instance, Donald Trump said that he was in favor of revoking citizenship for Americans that burned the American flag, which is one of our most important rights to freedom of speech. Right. He didn't get very much blowback at all from Republicans for that. Trump has spoken repeatedly about how he wishes to open libel laws to make it so it's easier for people in office, him especially, to sue media. He said repeatedly that media is the enemy of the people. These are some of the most worrying statements that a head of state can ever make if freedom of speech is a primary concern of yours.
Mm-hmm. But that's Donald Trump. I mean, I find him quite obnoxious and never was particularly supportive of him.
That's fine, but the majority of Republicans in the United States support Donald Trump, and he just called for suspending the Constitution a few days ago. So I don't really believe Republicans are conservatives when they say they're worried about freedom of speech. I think that when they say that, what they really mean is they don't like that they got banned on Twitter.
Okay, fine. Yeah. I am not a Republican in America. I'm not on the right. I am worried about freedom of speech.
Sure.
And one of the reasons we started this channel is we saw in our industry, which has always been very progressive, the comedy industry, comedians increasingly restricted, punished, cancelled, chased out, not given opportunities that they otherwise have been given for doing offensive jokes and or having the quote unquote wrong opinions. So I think to suggest that no one cares about free speech because Donald Trump doesn't care about free speech, you're grouping extremists in with lots of other people.
Well, the problem is that the extremist wing of the conservative party in the United States is the majority. That's the problem. Extremists in the United States on the left are a minority of the party, right? Not many Democrats consider themselves communists or socialists. That's like kids at school, or your radical, very slim minority people, your AOCs, right? But in the conservative party, they're currently tearing themselves apart because the majority of the party were on their knees for Trump for the last 4 or 5 years. I agree with you. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I always say I am longing for the day where I can go back to mocking the right for hating comedians and not allowing them to make jokes and blah, blah, blah. And I believe that eventually will happen. But I also think it's clear, very, very clear, where restrictions around comedy and all sorts of other speech are coming from culturally. Look, I hear you about Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump. But in terms of the broader culture, the attacks on people's opportunity to make jokes, to express opinions that are controversial, are overwhelming from the left, aren't they? When it comes to things like social media and cultural stuff, yeah, for sure. I don't disagree with that because that's kind of where the left has its power staked out in. But when it comes to legislation, I would say that the conservative threat is bigger there.
And so what do you mean by extremists? Let's actually break that down, because we're using the word extremist, and like all of these words, they mean different things to different people and context and whatever else. So tell us what you mean by extremist, Destin.
Sure. So I would say that Trump, for all intents and purposes, given the ability to run the government as he would, is about as close to a fascist as you could be without actually being a fascist. Or maybe he's a fascist, I'm not sure. Anybody that supports Donald Trump, even if you're well, I don't like him that much, but I guess is an extremist by any definition. The fact that January 6th happened and most Republicans don't care about it, the fact that so many of them, a majority of them, don't believe that the last election was done correctly, that it was rigged. These are the ideas of extremists. And
hold on,
may
I pause you there, Destiny? Again, in the spirit of just comparing things. So I remember, and look, I am sort of sitting and observing from both sides. We're not in America. I really don't affiliate myself with either side of the political spectrum. I remember quite distinctly Hillary Clinton saying Donald Trump is an illegitimate president in 2016. I personally know plenty of people in media and in politics and in all of these spheres who flat out denied that Donald Trump was legitimately elected in 2016, who said it was Russia collusion. I mean, look, I was one of them. I remember going on stage, I'm originally from Russia, and talking about how we helped to get Trump elected, right? Because he was so much in the air. The idea was he was elected illegitimately. So I find it hard to clutch my pearls when the Republicans do it, even though I disagree with it. I think the last election was fine, despite various shenanigans, including the Hunter Biden suppression and blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, I think to present this as the extremism of one side when both parties now do it, unfortunately, is that accurate? Is that reasonable?
Nope, it's the most inaccurate thing in the world. I've heard this talking point and rebutted it like 50 billion times. So everybody will point out the one quote where Hillary Clinton said that Donald Trump was an illegitimate president. That one quote. Donald Trump has made 50,000 other statements saying that the election was rigged.
Yeah, he repeats himself quite a lot, but that isn't the point. No, that isn't. But if I'm on stage as a comedian doing these jokes because it's in the culture and everyone laughs because they recognize the quote unquote truth in it, isn't that the point? A lot of people thought the election was stolen.
It is exactly the point. If we look at the behavior of the Democratic Party and the Democratic establishment versus the behavior of the Republican Party, Republican leaders and the Republican establishment, the difference is night and day. Hillary Clinton ceded the election the night of. Donald Trump tried to claim victory before the votes were even counted. Okay? Hillary Clinton gave one interview where she was salty and she said something about him being an illegitimate president. Donald Trump asked his vice president to overturn the results of the election. There have been a couple of people online that have gone too far, for sure, with the Russia collusion stuff, and it's pretty cringe. Donald Trump on January 6th basically led his followers into an attempted coup d'etat of the government, of which some people, the Oath Keepers, have been charged with sedition. The comparison is not even remotely close, and I can't believe anybody would try to say the two things are similar. Like, yeah, you can give me a few quotes that are stupid by liberal leaders that have said dumb shit about Trump that they shouldn't have said, and I agree with that. But to say that the two sides are the same on that, when Donald Trump to this day still believes that the election was actually rigged, I don't think it's even remotely comparable.
But do you think Hillary Clinton to this day believes that she lost that election fair and square?
Well, fair and square and actual rigged election are two different things, right?
Well, Russia collusion, do you think she believes that the election was taken away from her by Russian collusion?
Well, we already know that there was some form of Russia collusion, right? We already know that, like, yes, that some of the DNC hacks, for instance, was done by Russia, that there was coordination between the Guccifer people and WikiLeaks in order to time leaks to damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. We already know from the Mueller indictments that there was a company set up in the United States, one of them being the Internet Research Agency, that was literally setting up protests where they were organizing both sides of it to turn Americans against each other. We already know that that 10 GOP account that had more followers than the actual Tennessee GOP account was ran by people that were operating at the Kremlin. Like, we know that that's real. Now, whether or not like Trump himself was personally making requests, well, he did on TV, but maybe that was a joke, right? Like that maybe wasn't proven as much, but like, yeah, we know that there was some level of Russian meddling in order to try and get Trump elected.
No, we do know that. And I, as someone who's from Russia, believe me, I know all about the bot farms and whatever. You say that Donald Trump to this day believes that he didn't lose the election. I agree with that. And I think he's wrong. Does Hillary Clinton believe she didn't lose the election? I'm pretty sure she still believes the election was taken away from her unfairly.
Well, again, she believes that she lost the election. She's just going to argue over like what were the causes that happened that made the election go the way that it did. But that's fundamentally different than saying the vote totals were rigged. It's a totally wildly different claim.
I see your point. That's a fair point.
And what would you say to those people who go, look, you know, most of the Republicans at the time didn't want Trump. Trump has a different fan base, different voter base to a lot of the Republican Party. He brings his own people with him, a voter base that has been untapped for a long time, who have been neglected, who are a sizable portion of them were Bernie Sanders fans. So what would you say to them and that particular argument?
I look at any polling data ever to know that that's not true. I mean, Trump enjoys wide and broad support from the Republican Party. He didn't bring over that many Bernie voters. Trump was a very popular, he won a huge primary, like he smashed it with Republicans. The idea that Trump just brought some voters out of nowhere or something is just, yeah, that's not true.
He did. He brought a lot of people out who never voted for anyone as well. It happened the same with Brexit in this country. Millions of people, actually. But anyway, sorry, Francis, Karen.
No.
I mean, Trump's voter base looks exactly like most Republican voter bases. There wasn't, I'm not aware of this, like a whole bunch of I'm sure there were a lot of new voters because it was like a really big election. Same thing with Obama. But it's not like he like brought out some never before seen voter base of like a group of people that were untapped or whatever. Like it's the same Republican voters as always. Like he still enjoys broad support of the Republican Party from standard Republican voters.
Well, you know, when people, like, again, Destiny, I'm not a Trump fan. I want to make that clear. Not a Trump supporter in any shape or form.
He's a Trump enthusiast.
Yeah, I'm an enthusiast. You know, I've got the poster above my bed. But when people talk about Trump, particularly people on the left, and they're very critical of him, And this happens for Brexit as well. My response is always, the left created Trump, the left created Brexit, because there's a whole swathe of people in the United States, in Britain, that have felt left behind with the electoral system. They feel that the elites don't represent them. They've never cared about them. You know, they've seen deindustrialization. They've seen their jobs, their societies be absolutely gutted financially, their hearts and souls ripped out of them. And the parties like Labour or Democrats, who always purported to support, who always purported to care about the working classes, effectively abandoned them. So when this person came in, I always say to them, and again, I'm on the left, may I reiterate that, it's our fault. We didn't care about them, so we have helped to create this phenomenon.
I mean, yeah, people can say that, but I mean, like, that's kind of like that's just like the rhythm of politics throughout all of humankind, right? Like, arguably the left created Trump for sure, but the left that existed before Trump, that was created by conservatives for sure, right? Like the rabidly homophobic, the massive warmongering in the United States, the super anti-LGBT obsession, like all of that stuff. Of course, that created this fervent left that was like, oh, well, I hate you guys. Like, we need to have gay marriage, and you know, you guys are against abortion. Yeah. So I mean, like, yeah, of course, both sides are reactions to what the other side is doing, and that's not a new thing, right? Like Trump being created as some radical left group of people in the United States. I believe that, of course, but like that radical left didn't come from nowhere either. That was created out of radical conservatives for a long time too. That's just how that's the rhythm of politics, right?
Okay, and if that's the rhythm of politics, would you agree that things have become more heated now? That things have become more, So I guess my question is to you, as somebody who is obviously very intelligent and understands politics, how do we take the temperature down? How do we get better candidates for America? Because I think we can both agree Biden and Trump don't represent the best of your country.
Well, Biden's my guy. That guy represents a lot of good America. But obviously, as a Biden fan, I would say that. But I would say that the number one issue that we have right now is probably the internet. It's given us the ability to self-segregate in ways that we never have before. I can hyperfixate and find any piece of information that I want to support any story that I want, and then I can join another group of people, and we can all share it amongst ourselves. And there are huge financial incentives for honing in on the pieces of information that people want and serving it to them. And I think all of these things kind of like play really toxically on human psychology, and combined with capitalism, basically make this huge pot of gold waiting for anybody that can figure out how to serve you the most content that you want that agrees with what you already agree with over and over and over and over and over again. And I think the internet has like uniquely accelerated that problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man. And we do our best to stay away from that when we can. And of course, it's very easy to look around and go, oh, there's somebody else who just wants to feed their audience red meat all day long. So you answered very well Francis' question about where it's coming from, but you didn't answer how do we address it. What do you think?
This is where I give you the answer that I shouted at you for giving me about the family stuff. I don't, it's a big problem. So this is the number one issue. And so if you've ever,
I agree. It's the number one issue, by the way.
Or no, so here's the problem. Okay. In order to fix anything, first you have to recognize what the problem is, but most people won't actually recognize the problem. I'm 33. When I was a kid, there was this idea that the internet was going to be this amazing thing because now you can look up whatever piece of information you want. You've got so much at your fingertips. A lot of the internet and the information age rests on this absolutely faulty idea that humans are intrinsically truth-seeking machines. And that is absolutely not true. We do not gravitate towards things that are true. We gravitate towards things that make us feel good. And as the internet gets larger and larger and more information is put out there, people keep saying, well, the studies are available. There's Wikipedia, there's fact checkers, there's news sites, there's YouTube, there's all this stuff. You should know what's true and what's not true. It doesn't make the reason why that doesn't work is because people aren't seeking out what's true. They're seeking out what's entertaining or what makes them feel good about themselves.
Well, are you not generalizing? Because look,
I'm not.
I am not perfect. I am not perfect, and I definitely like to have my opinions confirmed. But one of the things we've really tried very carefully to do on the show is to genuinely seek truth and to change our mind when we're confronted with facts and to discuss things with people who have different opinions. And our audience Some of them like it, some of them don't. But generally speaking, we don't give a shit because we believe that's the mission of Triggernometry, and the people who want that will come. And we just interviewed a guy called Isaac Saul, who's created a website, which is like a media website that both conservatives and liberals rate very highly on trust because it covers things objectively. And so do you not think, like you were talking about politics, where you get action, reaction, there will also be a reaction against this echo chamberness that we are seeing now? And I think quite a lot of people, I mean, you yourself, aren't you an example of this? You were somebody who was feeding red meat or blue meat or whatever to your audience, and then you decided you didn't want to do that anymore.
I try not to, but the difference is that like I go out of my way to have like, there are different things that I do to make sure that I'm not just doing the echo chamber thing. So for instance, for any topic that I debate, I can always convincingly debate the other side. There's not a single issue that I argue on where I can't give the other side's argument better than anybody really that would debate me on it, because I've heard all of the best arguments for it. So there's a lot of clips of me like arguing like this is why the Holocaust didn't happen, or this is why black people deserve whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it's just me providing the other side and like, this is what they would say.
Sounds like great content, mate.
Sure. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and people will clip it and go, oh my God, Destiny's nuts, blah, blah, blah. But I'm just saying that like, so that's one thing I'll do, right? I'll make sure that like, okay, yeah, you know, whatever I'm arguing, I can always argue the other side. I'm not just giving my points. That's one thing. A second thing I'll do is anytime I hold a position on anything, I'll always ask myself the question, what would it take to change my mind on a particular issue? And if I don't have an answer for that, if there's nothing that would change my mind, then I know that I'm getting lost down some type of like echo chamber. There's a bunch of other smaller things, but like those are two big things that I'll try to keep in mind when it comes to like forming and solidifying my political opinions and then arguing with other people. But I find that a lot of people don't do any of these things. There's a lot of people that ask, it's like, okay, well, how strongly do you believe in this thing? What is the strength of your conviction? And they're like, oh, I would say it's like a 9 out of 10. And I'm like, wow. Like how much research did you do? And it's like, well, I listened to a Joe Rogan podcast on it. Okay, what would it take to change your mind? It's like, I don't know if you could change my mind on this. You have a 9 out of 10 conviction on something that you heard one time on a podcast, and nothing can change your mind over it. I think that's the majority of people.
No, look, you're making good points, but that isn't what I was saying. What I was saying is, if you are seeking the truth, and we are seeking the truth as best we can, we're not perfect. None of the three of us are, of course. But if we're doing that, why don't you think that other people also want that?
I just don't think there's much of a reward for it. It's pretty rare. Like I built a brand off of that kind of stuff, but I've also paid like a really heavy price for it too. Now I'm lucky that I'm big enough online that I can afford to pay some prices, but there's a lot of money there's a concept called audience capture where you begin to deliver a certain type of content, your audience likes it, and then you keep feeding them what they want. And that's like where most of the money online is to be made. You know, people will constantly say this thing, media is a reflection of what the people want, but all the people do is complain about the media. However, people will complain, I don't like the media, they're too sensationalist, they're too radicalized, they're too horrible, blah, blah, blah. But then you look at the media they consume, they're not watching like NPR or PBS or like these boring, dry documentaries. They're watching people screaming at each other about how like, we need to go and kill all of these people, or we need to throw these people in jail. And it's like, bro, you're consuming exactly the type of media that is being served to you. Like, of course, media is going to work that way.
Again, I know I keep positioning myself as this brilliant counterexample, but I've stopped watching lots of people who went down the path that you talk about. I'm not going to name names, but there are lots of people who started out, for example, being like, hey, I'm a liberal. I'm just asking questions about, you know, and before you know it, they're like this massive conservative. I'm like, well, that's not interesting to me, right? And
that's awesome. If you do that, that's awesome. But like, I'm pretty sure Tim Pool is like one of the most popular, like second or third most popular media podcasts.
Oh, sure. No.
And that guy's off the wall a lot, you know, like, yeah.
I've been on his show and I challenged him and he immediately unfollowed me on Twitter afterwards. So there you go. But that's not my point. My point is, if there are people like you and if there are people like us, isn't that actually reason for optimism? And if we are doing that, there've got to be other people there who are not content creators who are also interested in that process of de-radicalization, if you want to call it that.
Oh, sure. I think it's possible. Yeah. I think there is cause to be optimistic for it. I think something that's happened over the years is people that are correct assume that they don't have to dress their message up at all because they're factually correct. And what's happened is over the years, over a decade, basically people that I would say are incorrect have spent so much time dressing their message up to make it exciting, entertaining, easily palatable. And they've done a really good job of growing audiences, while people who are, I would say, more factually correct are just lazy and boring, and they don't do much to make their message more, digestible to people. So I think if people,
lazy and boring, mate.
well, no, or even myself, like, because I
my gym routine.
I would say about myself for a long time, like, oh yeah, there's no point in arguing this. Like, people just want sensational content, blah, 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 blah. But I think if you put a lot of effort into making like good content around stuff that isn't like super politically radical, I think you can get viewers doing it. That's my current political project is what I'm trying to do.
Well,
So
that's what we're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important as well is to have faith in in the audience and have faith in your fellow human beings, because it's very easy, and look, I do it as well. When you see these, so-and-so destroys so-and-so, whatever it may be, they get huge views. You think, oh, this person or all these people love this. And it goes, just because something is popular actually doesn't mean that people enjoy it. Doesn't mean that they find it rewarding. If you look at the mainstream media, one of the biggest interviews in the history of the internet in UK media was when Channel 4 interviewed Jordan Peterson. And it was kind of a gotcha style interview, and that produced the saying, so what you're saying is, right? Mm-hmm. Because she kept trying to misrepresent. Mm-hmm. And it got huge views, but it really destroyed Channel 4's reputation. I mean, there are a lot of people, and anecdotally, and people that I talked to, who saw that as a time when the mainstream media lost their way, not just Channel 4. So I think it's important to have faith in people and realize that a lot of people want to be treated like adults as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. Yeah, I mean, that's the direction that I'm pushing my political content. So hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, and you said you paid a heavy price for what you would for your views and your opinions. What do you mean by that, Destiny? What is the heavy price?
Well, I mean, I didn't toe the line on the Rittenhouse thing. I felt pretty strongly about that, and it cost me my partnership on Twitch. I get into fights with a lot of what I would consider very radical trans people, and that I think arguably cost me my account on Twitch. So yeah, I mean, depending on who I'm fighting with at any point in time, depending on how principled I want to be in my positions, it can get me into a lot of trouble. But
and what was your beef with the trans issue? I'm curious.
I don't believe that trans women and cis women should be competing together in the same athletic events. I don't think that there's a good argument for that.
You lost your Twitch account for that?
I don't know. I can't honestly tell you. All I know is that my account got banned the next day it said hateful speech, but they don't tell you exactly what it was. So, but I don't use transphobic slurs or I'm very pro-trans. I don't use any like slurs or anything like that. So I don't really know what my account got banned for.
What does it mean that you're very pro-trans?
I think that trans people are real. I think that they're entitled to some type of medical treatment. I probably would support minors seeking medical treatment, depending on the roadblocks that are there or the path to getting medical treatment there. It just depends on the particular issue.
Okay, so you would see minors. What are we talking about with minors, Destiny? At what age would you say somebody should be allowed to seek medical treatment?
All of it's going to come down to what clinically becomes like the most effective line of treatment. But essentially, if somebody knows, I think that if by like 13, 14, especially when you start going through puberty, you're going to know if you're trans or not. You're going to definitely feel it then. Now, some people might think they're trans, but they're not. But if they are trans, they'll know it then. So we need to figure out better forms of therapy or counseling to where we can weed out the people that probably aren't trans and are having other problems in their life versus the ones that definitely are trans, so that hopefully you can avoid them going through like the catastrophic male puberty for trans women is the thing that fucks them up a lot.
Right. Well, would you agree? That's actually, I think, a quite a healthy way to a large extent of looking at it, which is we need to make sure that the people who are getting the physical and hormonal transition really are the ones that are like definitely trans. Because we've seen in this country, I don't know if you're familiar with the Tavistock Clinic, and all the associated things that have been going on in this country, but we've seen thousands of people now suing because they were encouraged to transition when perhaps it wasn't the right decision for them. Would you agree that we probably went too far in that direction at some point?
It's possible that the thing is, it's hard to say, like, are we going too far? I'm sure that you could find examples of going too far. And I'm sure
there's thousands of examples. This is what I'm saying. Thousands of detransitioners, thousands of people suing.
Sure, I understand what you're saying, but the UK has a population of like 70 million people. So when you say thousands of examples, I don't know if that means much, right? So I agree that we can probably find lots of examples of people going too far, but you would have to agree that there's probably lots of examples of not going far enough. Like, I'm pretty sure in the United Kingdom, the wait time for hormone therapy or related stuff, even even if you have gone through the whole process, you're fully approved, it's like 2 to 4 years, which is horrible, right? If we do
this is what happens when you have socialized healthcare. You're going to wait for an ambulance for about 40 hours in this country.
Well, thankfully in the United States, you don't have to wait. You just die because you can't afford the treatment. So, I mean,
they're both bad options.
yeah, well, I mean, you guys spend way less on your healthcare than we do, and we seem to have comparable outcomes. So, I mean,
do you know that the National Health Service is like the fourth biggest employer in the world, I think, in this country. So we spend quite a lot on healthcare. Let's not open that.
Yeah, we still spend probably in the United States, like 4 times more U.S. spending on health. Like if I were to check, like the United States spends more money than anyone else in the world on healthcare. It's insane.
Well, of course, you're the richest country in the world. But look, let's come back to the trans issue, because this is kind of important. Yes, I am sure that there are some trans people for whom who ended up having to wait too long for hormones. I think that's a lot less bad than people, no offense, I'm going to put it quite bluntly, chopping their dick off when they didn't mean to.
Yeah, but like the problem is like the less bad thing. Like it feels like let's see.
A child chopping their dick off seems like quite a big problem to me.
Yeah, but also somebody killing themselves because they're not allowed to get treatment because conservatives don't believe trans people are real. That's also a really big problem.
Hold on. First of all, I'm not a conservative. Secondly, I didn't say you were,
but I'm saying that's the other end of the argument.
But you're arguing with me, not with conservatives, right? So let's have the debate between me and you, not
okay, well, but I'm not in favor of children chopping their dicks off if they're not actually trans. So I don't know who you're arguing with for that point, right?
No. You said that I actually agreed with you. I said I think you're right to say that that people need to be weeded out. I think it was the term you used.
Yeah.
To make sure that people who are going through transition are definitely the people who need it, right? And what I'm saying to you, from my perspective, we had thousands of people who did do that, who were not actually trans, and who needed help for autism or who needed help for some other kind of thing that they were dealing with, right? And isn't that a problem that shows that we went way too far in that direction, causing thousands of young children to be injured and maimed for life?
Okay, are you saying that in the United Kingdom, there were thousands of children given sex reassignment surgery? Like
there were thousands. So we have thousands of people suing the Tavis clinic. There's probably more than that.
Well, hold on. I'm asking very specifically because you're saying that there were thousands of children in the UK. That would be tremendous if that was the case. You're saying there are thousands of children, minors, in the UK, is it 16 or 18?
Under 18. Yeah.
Had sex reassignment surgery. That means
no. They had some form of medical treatment in that area. So either hormones or what do you mean? Oh, hormones change your biology just the same.
Well, there's a huge difference between a 15-year-old went on puberty blockers for a year versus a 15-year-old had their penis chopped off. Those are not to say that either is okay, but like the puberty blockers.
That's my point. Neither is okay.
But they're worlds apart in terms of like harm.
They're not worlds apart. If you take puberty blockers, that has a huge impact on fertility, on your life, on your voice, on your physical appearance. We see people who are basically young women with beards now. You think that's not a big transition for someone to go through?
I didn't say it wasn't a big transition.
So that's all I'm saying.
No, hold on. You said that it's not worlds apart. I'm telling you that it is worlds apart.
I didn't say it's not worlds apart.
Yeah, okay. I'm saying that it is worlds apart. The difference between being on puberty blockers for a year versus having your genitals changed is huge, right?
Of course.
Both can be bad. Okay. Gotcha.
The difference between being punched in the face and beaten endlessly in the face is quite big. I think that a young child being punched in the face is bad.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. If it is the case that there are people that are inappropriately issued or prescribed medications or whatever as minors, that sucks. What we have to figure out is like, what is the cost benefit, right? Like, let's say, for instance, it's the case that 10 children per year are prescribed something that they didn't need, and 10,000 children per year are prescribed something they did need. That'd probably be an acceptable trade-off. But if it's like 100,000 children a year given something they don't need, and 1,000 children a year giving something they do need, that would be a totally unacceptable trade-off, right?
So this is what I'm saying. We have thousands of people suing one clinic in this country. And this problem is even worse in the United States, statistically speaking. We have thousands of people. It is. Thousands of people doing one. Yes.
I don't think it is.
Well, this is where you and I might agree. Because you have paid medicine, there's the financial incentive to encourage this as well. But just stick with this point with me, right?
Okay.
Thousands of children, over 1,000 people suing the Tavistock Clinic because they believe they were giving the wrong treatment in relation to transition. And it's my view that the reason that happened is that there was ideological capture. You talk about audience capture. There was ideological capture in these left-wing institutions, as we talked about before, that encouraged this process and ended up taking it way, way, way past the line that you and I both agree is the right line, which is let's make sure these people are definitely trans before we start cutting things off them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure where the disagreement is. Like, if there are medical practitioners,
I'm asking you, do you think we went too far, given that those were the results?
Holistically, no. For this one clinic, yeah, possibly. It sounds like it. You're saying that they're going to be in the process of suing them. I don't know what that case is going to look like until it starts to play out on the courts, but it could be the case that this clinic went too far. Yeah.
Okay, if 1,000 women sued me on allegations of sexual harassment, would you conclude that I was a stand-up guy?
No.
Right. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
No. Do you see the difference, though? If you were to ask me, do you think that the Tavis stock clinic went too far? I would say, yeah, of course. It sounds like it for sure it does. But you're not asking me that. You're asking me if the whole of trans stuff in the world has gone too far. And then you're citing me one court case that hasn't even started yet, where families might sue the Tavis stock.
I mean, I personally know like 10 people that I've spoken to who are detransitioners, who were encouraged down this path in your country, not ours, that are public about it. Now, imagine how much it takes to go public after you've gone through that. I imagine there's quite a lot of people in America who've gone through the same process who are not happy about it.
Yeah, but there's probably a lot of other people on the other side, too, who are trans and could never get medical treatment or was never taken seriously or had horrible problems their whole lives and nobody saw them either, right?
I mean, I don't agree with that, but let's leave that.
Wait, hold on. How can you not agree with that? You don't think that there are...
You're suggesting that in the current climate, there are people who are being denied transition?
Yeah, if you live in like Louisiana or Indiana or Mississippi, or if you're in one of these states or whatever, you don't think some of these people could be born to families that don't believe in trans people or in communities that don't think that trans people are real, that don't want to come out or don't even know about the idea of it? Yeah, of course.
Well, I'm not get on the bus and go to another state?
No. In the United States, we don't have buses like you guys do. Okay, we have school buses.
Okay, can they not get on a plane? I mean,
I'm serious. You can't. Hold on, get on a plane. Come on, can you just rent a flat in London and go work there? No, of course, these things are expensive, right? I just want to be clear.
Well, you can't afford a $300 flight if you're going to get hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars of surgery.
It's not just about getting the surgery. You're jumping ahead to the most radical thing. A lot of trans people that are fully transitioned don't even get sex reassignment surgery. That's like the most extreme thing. But no, I don't think the average teenager in the United States who's 14, 15, 16 years old can afford a $300 plane ticket. I don't think so. I don't even know if you're allowed to fly as a minor without an adult accompanying. I'm not sure.
You're not allowed to fly, but you're allowed to chop your dick off. That seems quite extreme to me.
I think, okay. I'm acknowledging, I'll make the acknowledgement that like there are clinics and there are people that have suffered ideological capture and have gone too far with some of the trans stuff. I agree with that in terms of diagnosing people. But to say that like it's never happened on the other end, I don't think that that's an honest engagement with the topic.
It sounds like you just hate it. That's not, I'm not saying it's never happened. I'm just saying I think we went too far towards one side rather than the other. And I will grant you, 50 years ago, yeah, I don't think trans people had a great life. I think we can all agree on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We'll leave that there because I think we've both said basically what we both mean.
Right. Sure. Okay. So just staying with the trans issue, but a different part of it. Mm-hmm. What do you think about with gender ID, Destiny? Somebody identifying as a woman and then having access to women's spaces. Do you think that is? Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
I don't agree with the self-ID position at all. No.
Okay. Interesting. Why?
It just doesn't. It's a totally incoherent position. If we believe that gender is real, which I think we used to, if trans people believe that gender is real, which a lot of them do, but some of the more extreme ones don't, then that has to be reducible to some real facet of your brain. And it can't just be that you are what you say you are. That doesn't make any sense. There has to be an underlying fact of the matter. You can't just identify as something and be something. So yeah, I don't think that you can just identify as whatever and then get access to whatever. There has to be some process to verify or validate whatever it is you're identifying as.
Okay, and do you think, for instance, trans women should have access to women's spaces if they've gone a part of the way there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
It depends on what they present as. I mean, like if they present as a woman and they look like a woman and for all intents and purposes it seems like it, then yeah, they probably should. Yeah.
Okay, and what about when it comes to things like women's refuges, women's prisons, where there are vulnerable women? Do you think that should be a space for biological women only?
Almost certainly not, but those get more complicated.
Why do you say almost certainly not?
Because nobody agrees with that position. That's insane.
Well, there are people who certainly agree with that position.
That's only because they haven't thought about it much. Like,
no, I would disagree with that.
Hold on, I'm curious. Do either of you have daughters?
No.
Okay, if you had do you know who Buck Angel is?
Yes, we've had him on the show.
We've interviewed Buck.
Would you want your daughter sharing a jail cell or a shower or a bathroom with Buck Angel? Because that's a biological female. Okay, so that's a biological female. So when people say like only biological female should be, like, I don't know what people mean by that. That sounds insane to me. I think that there are people that have transitioned far enough where it's obvious they should be housed differently. Now, if you're like a huge burly guy and you've got a huge beard and huge muscles and you're like, well, I'm a woman and I identify as, then no, fuck you. Either go somewhere else or figure something else about it. But for people that are like clearly passing, right? Like, I don't think I would want to be in some space with my son if we go to like a sauna or some shit. I don't know if people do that. And all of a sudden somebody steps in and they got these huge knockers, these massive, 34 double triple Ds. And I'm like, whoa, what are you doing in here? That's a little bit strange. You're like, oh, well, I'm a biological male, even though I've got like, I'm fully passing and fully blah, blah. Like, that's just weird to me. I think it's going to depend a lot on if the person is passing or not.
That makes sense. I agree with you. So, and let's go to another issue that I think you and I probably will agree on, hopefully, which is the war in Ukraine, because I find it absolutely mind-boggling how both a section of the left and right have come up with all sorts of crazy conspiracy shit about that they indulge in, simply because they want to oppose the current thing. What have you made of all of that?
I said for a while in the United States, probably around the world, there's kind of this big like populist rift. And I think that populists in general feel a certain way about things. And there's a lot of populists on the left and right. And so they all kind of like come together on how they view a lot of the Ukrainian stuff. So like a populist might tend to be like isolationist or might tend to be like not involved in foreign affairs. So they'll see us sending any money to a country as like evil or horrible. And everybody's got problems with their countries in the West. So they'll say like, well, Russia's better or the West is corrupt and blah, blah, blah. Or they'll say things like, I don't trust Western media, but then they'll start giving you news from Russia today. Like, I don't know. It's all just, I think like, in my opinion, populism is like a brain rot, but yeah, I think it all comes.
That's what I find very odd. When people rightly say they don't trust the Western mainstream media, I think they're right not to. I think the Western mainstream media.
Yeah, but if you say that you don't trust Western media and then you cite me Russia Today, all you've told me is that you have like 65 IQ or you're in the middle of a stroke. Like, there's just no shot.
You said it better than I ever could or would.